I think I'm going to start. So I'd like to welcome you all. Today we will have Dr. Michael Moore speaking to us. And as you can see, he's past president of the World Federation of Public Health Associations. He's former CEO of the Public Health Association of Australia, a distinguished fellow of the George Institute for Global Health, and adjunct professor at the University of Canberra, a visiting professor at the University of Technology in Sydney, and he also was Australia's first independent minister. And I really welcome Dr. Michael Moore, who'll be talking to us about public health advocacy, looking at politics, power, and persuasion.
Thanks very much, Paula. And there's a couple of things I'd like to start with. I was elected under the Hare-Clark system, and it's only 3 jurisdictions in the world that use it: Malta, Tasmania, and the Australian Capital Territory. And so we have this in common. But I normally start, because I'm an Australian, acknowledging our Indigenous people, and I live on the land of the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri peoples. And so I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And look, that's a fundamental thing for us because it's about health equity. And I think, as we all understand, with public health, equity is really a key driver for us. But let's talk about public health advocacy, because keep in mind that public health is pervasive, and we were reminded of this so much through the COVID era, and which is still going, of course, because it became apparent not just to those of us who work in public health, but to so many other people that public health is political, it's economic, it's environmental, it's social, it's engineering, and architecture, town planning. One could keep going. And I think that fundamental understanding is very important in public health advocacy, because it means we can bring in so many people around us to support the sorts of things that we're talking about. And nowhere is this more obvious than with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And, you know, this is the World Health Organization's presentation. And of course, they put good health and well-being first. But have a look at the Sustainable Development Goals. It doesn't really matter which of them you choose. There is a public health aspect to them, and it's a good reminder that everything that we're doing is important in population health terms, environmental terms, engineering terms, in all of these things. But the thing that drives them all is politics. And so let's just take a step back and say, well, what is public health advocacy? And I defined this in my PhD as a deliberate process of using knowledge and evidence to support or argue in favour of a cause, a policy, an idea, in order to influence decision makers and public opinion, in order to deliver better population health outcomes. And that's to distinguish it from the sort of advocacy that one does in support of somebody with a disability, for example, or a mental health issue. That is advocacy as well, but it's not the sort of public health advocacy that we're talking about today, which is about influencing a policy, influencing government. So let's keep in mind how important the public health professional is. And to do that, I like to say that firemen save lives, paramedics save lives, nurses save lives, doctors save lives, and public health professionals also save lives, but the only difference is that we do it 1 million at a time. And sometimes it's really important for us to remember this, because it's very easy to look at that wonderful thing that a medical professional does when they've got somebody who is close to passing away and they're able to bring them back. But the reality is that public health professionals have much more impact than that individual treatment time. And I can come back to use the example. Oh yeah, I did steal this, by the way, from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, that concept. we can come back to this because one of the things I like to talk about is vaping, because the difference between treating an individual and working at a population health level, because I think it provides a good example. And to actually see where I work from, the fundamental starting point is our global charter for the public's health. And because so often, particularly before the pandemic, people say, well, what is public health? And it's very simple to answer. Well, it's protection, prevention, and health promotion. It's the way those things work together. And the charter was developed from building on the Declaration of Alma Ata, on the Ottawa Charter, on the Millennium Development Goals, and it needs to be read in conjunction with the Sustainable Development Goals. So we talk about those 7 areas of action. So we talk about the services, and that's the protection, prevention, and health promotion. By the way, if I am talking too fast, please slow me down. Because just do that, and I'll get it. And of course, the enablers. We used to just say governance, information, advocacy, and capacity building. And then Donald Trump came along and we went, oh, actually accurate information. Oh, good governance. Then so we added effective advocacy and capacity building. So the question for each of us is, so, you know, I'm a public health dentist. Can I really have influence? What, me? Can I? And I think that's the purpose of what I really want to talk about today. And the most important thing to understand is that advocacy is political, and it's worth understanding that it's a really challenge, and you can read that. Nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. And this came from one of the very early commentators on politics, who also said that if you haven't laid your foundations, you can manage afterwards, but it's with a huge amount of trouble. And of course, that is Niccolo Machiavelli. And I think that keeping in mind that it is a political act, and look, it's not necessarily easy. Sometimes we think of standing out, and we've even seen it, I think, with the pandemic. But here's a fabulous example where we prefer to take, from 1848, and this is the time, of course, of John Snow. We prefer to take our chance with cholera and the rest than be bullied into health. There's nothing our man hates so much as to being cleansed against his walls, and so on. And I think that it's a reminder that no matter what we try to do to improve people's health, to improve health outcomes, there will always be those who are opposed to what we are doing. Now, an even more specific example comes from The Lancet. You know, The Lancet's an amazing journal. And yet here we were, well, certainly when I was taught epidemiology, we have the idea that John Snow discovers cholera. He works on the Broad Street pump, and then everybody goes, that's the problem. Okay, let's implement. But that's not how it happened. And here's an example from The Lancet where he's described, and this is about John Snow, crotchety, treasonable behaviour. Society wounds itself when it discredits the teachings of science because of these crude opinions and hobbyistic dogmas. And so no matter what we do in public health advocacy, we can be sure that there will be those who have a different opinion, who are more concerned. So it's something for us to keep in mind. Let me just check and see if there's any questions. At the moment, I see somebody put something in chat, but it's not possible for me to read. I mean, I can read it, I just can't understand it. Are there any questions from anybody at this point? I shall continue. We'll start with some of that opposition that I've been talking to. Now, this is my friend and colleague, Mike Daub. Mike was really the major driver, or one of the major drivers, behind plain packaging of tobacco, first in Australia and now internationally. he points out this tie, which has been, it says, democracy is not a spectator sport. And it's a great concept. But when you realise that it was distributed by Philip Morris to every member of the House of Representatives and every member of the Senate in the United States with the Philip Morris badge, to as part of their influence. And, you know, it's a great concept, and we see it around, and it's absolutely true. But we have to remember that every time we are trying to influence, there is somebody also trying to influence in the opposite direction, usually for profit. Sometimes what we do is use systems that are just different and refreshing. So Mike Daub, one of mine, also has this thing. I'm going to try, Paula, to see if I can play a short grab, a video grab. Let's see how we go, and see if we can, if this goes through. Are we winning? We're not winning. Are we? Come on.
Maybe you can find it through internet and share it. I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to just take that one off, like that, and I'm going to just try. Oops, today's. Try one other thing if I can. Oh no, that didn't work. I have sent Paula the PDF to you, and so your colleagues can.
I can circulate it.
Anybody on the thing,
website.
if you can send it, they'll be able to use the address on the end. Mike's dog he refers to as Dr. Olivia Dole. The predatory journals that seek editors and so forth. Mike has actually made a CV for Ollie, Dr. Olivia Dole, and has put her down to be on editorial boards of the editorial journals. And she's on about 7 or 8 editorial journals, even though her CV basically explains that she's a dog. That's how closely they read them. And what he was trying to do was just illustrate that, and he actually published in the Australian Medical Journal, which is a very high rating publication, about how he had done this. And so it's in advocacy terms, it's just a really important way of illustrating to government, to the public, to researchers, that we have to be very, very careful how we operate. And one of my Mike Daub, he also made a list of how many lobbyists there are working just in the Australian Parliament. Now, remember, we have 25 million people in Australia, a federation, the states and territories, and the federal Parliament. We're talking about the federal Parliament. In tobacco, still, despite our low numbers of people using tobacco, they have 20 direct lobbyists, lobbying clients, and 14 indirect. So indirect are other companies employed by the tobacco companies. In alcohol, there's 43 alcohol companies that are registered on our register of lobbyists, and 23 indirect. In junk food, 33 and 13, and in gambling, 31 direct. So these industries that undermine public health have a huge impact.
Can we mute? Amapa, can we mute, please?
I think that's okay. I note that how are we going? So I note that we have all of those areas, and of course they can put money in it. And compared to that, in public health, we have maybe 4 or 5 lobbyists, one from the Public Health Association, one from the Health Promotion Association, the public health physicians. You know, there's a small number of people who can maybe send one person to Parliament House occasionally. And so matching up to that is, it can be really, really challenging. What we do have is credibility, and that's what we have to retain. And Mike Daub gives 12 commandments as to what you do as a public health advocate. And that credibility is the first one. Be professional, know what you want. So it's absolutely no good going to talk to a member of Parliament or even the bureaucracy if you don't actually know what you want. And in some ways, this seems really self-evident, but I have to say, I reckon that 3 or 4 times a week, there would be somebody come to me when I was a health minister and tell me what a problem was, but had no idea what they thought was a solution or what it was that they were looking for. Understand your own strengths and use them. Never do it by yourself. Always build coalitions and get a consensus about what it is that you want. Use comprehensive approaches. Understand your target. Are you actually trying to reach the bureaucracy? Are you trying to reach a minister's staffer? Are you trying to reach a minister? Are you reaching out to a parliamentary committee? There's a whole series of different targets that you really need to understand. And when you do, you work with all levels of government and politics. You don't just work with those in government. So we recently have a major change in policy in Australia on vaping. And even when I was in the CEO of the Public Health Association of Australia back in 2018, we already had policies established within government and within opposition, the same policies. And we were also working very closely with the bureaucracy to develop those policies, because we understood that, yes, some people will need vaping to help them give up smoking, but we also don't want it widespread amongst our young children. And we've been partially successful. In public health, hardly anything is fully successful. Play politics and politicians, remembering that if you are being involved in politics, one thing you never do is attack personally a politician, attack their policies. And that's why I use that term, the critical friend, because you can be critical of what they're saying, you can criticize what they're saying, or remember, you should also be critical to what their decision-making is. So it's a play on words. But the friend element is really important, because that says you're not attacking somebody personally. Understand and work with the media, including new media. Identify the opposition and oppose it. And that's the tobacco companies, the alcohol companies, and so on. And stay with it. Overnight success, that's a lovely term that Mike uses. Overnight success, it takes time. And finally, give credit. You know, it's very interesting that in politics, it's very rare for somebody to publicly praise and give credit to a minister or somebody who's made a decision or somebody who's brought about a parliamentary committee. And yet, and because it's so rare, it's well noticed. Another one of our public health professionals, Simon Chapman, has 10 commandments as he sees them. Respect the evidence. And look, I think it's really important, because we talked about credibility. And you get credibility by respecting evidence. But Simon makes the point that if the evidence changes, then you should have an open mind and be able to change with it. Be clear about what you want to change or support. And that's similar to what Mike Daub asked. Simon has always had a very high profile, and he says it's better to be looked over than overlooked, quoting Mae West. So you get out there and you make a fuss in his mind. Experts are fine, but they're not a living thing. So an expert in oncology is, let me give a dental example, much smarter in public health dentistry. it's fine for somebody, as I did many times, speak on the importance of fluoride in our water supplies, particularly in Queensland where they were trying to remove it. But nothing has the effect as much as comparing two relatively young children who've got serious caries, and compared to an individual in one of the fluoridated cities where they don't have the same problem. Once again, it takes time for successful advocacy. Study the media, and I think it's a really important thing Simon uses here in terms of use killer facts. So experts are fine, but not a living thing. So yes, you bring the child with caries or a baby with cancer when you're trying to influence, but also have with you those really influential statistics, and as he calls them, killer facts. Don't forget your values, and that's about equity. It's about all of those fundamental things that we who work in public health understand, social determinants of health. Simon is not being hypocritical when he says use social media a lot. He does, and that in itself has a significant influence. I did show you those slides about cholera and John Snow. John Snow must have had a rhinoceros hide. I'll just go back to John Snow, by the way, just as a matter of interest. From my perspective, the thing that influenced the changes in London and brought about all the sewers was not so much what John Snow had done, although that was absolutely important, but he was 1854. 1858 was the Great Stink in London. The Thames was so filthy that Westminster actually couldn't sit. It was so putrid. And so, of course, the politicians looked around to go, oh, what do we have to do? What's the reason for doing this? Oh, look, here we are. We have the evidence from John Snow. And so it was a combination of having that evidence, but then the political drivers behind it. And I think that's the thing that I think drives the things I do. Another colleague of mine has these 5, and he says, link with allies, develop consensus. So his are a bit more succinct. Establish your case, make sure you know what you're talking about, build those relationships, promote your cause, and don't forget to praise decision makers. So they had a big influence on me. I'll go very quickly with this advocacy toolkit because you can look it up in the Public Health Advocacy Institute. It's now of Australia, but it's based at Curtin University in Western Australia. And they have a whole series of similar sorts of approaches that are worth looking at. And then they say, don't forget to enjoy yourself in this whole process. Ones that we hadn't mentioned was create your champions. Always have some tricks up your sleeve. And I'll give a little example of a trick that you can sometimes only use these things once. So when I was in politics, when I was a crossbench member before I became a minister, I saw a press release came out, and it was in the days when we had fax machines, not email distribution to media. But we did have fax machines that had we could program so that we could just put it in and distribute to all our media outlets. As soon as this press release came in, I actually can't even remember what it was about. My advisor said, I'll write a press release knocking this idea. I said, no, we don't do that. And I actually took a big, thick pen and wrote on it, this is crap. Put it on the fax and sent it out. Every single media outlet interviewed me. Why? Because it was just different. And if I tried to do it a second time, it wouldn't work. But sometimes innovation and new ideas become really, really critical. So
can I ask a question, Michael? A quick one.
Paula.
And there's somebody else who has a question. So if, there was an opportunity of meeting your minister, like, I call it the elevator pitch, you have
Yes.
3 minutes in which I really want to get your attention. So would it be something innovative, as you said, which is going to make it? What would be your really advice on those 3 minutes, because you've highlighted a lot of points, but to get all those into a 3-minute lift ride up 5 or 10 floors, depending which country you're in.
So what you're trying to do is share with the minister here the fundamental idea. So you're trying to get 1 point across, maybe 2, but a fundamental idea, that's the first thing. The second thing is you are trying to build a relationship. So the first 30 seconds is building that relationship. Minister, I note that my child was playing soccer with yours, and how great is it that they do that as a team? That's terrific. Minister, I saw in the paper yesterday that you stated that da 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 da, and I think that's a great idea. But actually, what I wanted to talk to you about was the extraordinary amount of caries that are occurring in this country, and the fact that we still don't have fluoride in the water. Is there any chance that I can set up a meeting with you or one of your members of staff? And so it's about, the elevator pitch is really only about opening a door. If the minister is really caught by your idea because they haven't really thought about it, or they think you might have a good solution, they may well say, well, wait on, you've got time to discuss it. So that would be the best. The next best is, look, if you phone my office, I'll let them know that you're making an appointment. Third is, the person you need to get in touch with my office is Mary, who looks after this particular area for me. So Mary, when you contact Mary, you say, I was speaking to the minister and he suggested I speak to you, and it's about this area. And so the staffer is the one that will feed in. Remember that the minister, at the same time as you're doing that, you're now going to move across to the bureaucracy, and you're going to find the right section in the bureaucracy. I was speaking to the minister the other day. He's asked me to speak to his staffer, but I wanted to brief you so that you knew what was happening. And hopefully the bureaucracy and you, when you meet with the staffer, are going in the same direction. They brief the minister, and the minister either asks you to come in or asks for an extra paper on something, and builds it up that way. Did that answer your question okay? Yeah. I saw Anna had a question there, and I can't see it. Was that Anna's question?
No. She has another question. Which,
in the chat, let me have a quick look.
She said, since you mentioned influence, she was wondering what would be your opinion on influence and connections of sugary food and beverage industry. I mean, both in terms of influence on lay people as well as to the dental community.
And actually, I've spent a lot of time on this. Anna, I was heavily involved in a front of pack labelling system. In Australia, we use Health Star system. The more stars, the healthier the food. And look, it's got pluses and minuses. The best system is actually the French system. But well, it was when I looked 18 months ago. I haven't been so focused in that area. Look, in the end, I think it's persistence. It's making sure that we see those messages on television, that we make sure that the ministers understand that action on sugary drinks is really, really important. And I think the easiest way to grab their attention is taxation on sugary soft drinks. And therefore, you're not just talking to the Minister for Health, you're talking to Treasury and Finance, and maybe your Chief Minister, Head Minister, whatever the name is, because they are actually going to be interested in the revenue. And so if you can have a revenue idea that has a good public health reason behind it, it's not like saying, oh, you're just being taxed. It's just not another big tax. They get the revenue, but there's a a good reason to make people healthier. So we'll come back to that if you'd like to ask a question further. I'll just run through these. I don't think I've got too many more slides to go. Trying to remember. I don't have too many. This particular slide is really where I came from. And what I tried to do was say, when we're doing public health advocacy, we should be doing it in a chronological order. And so the first of these is to establish a sense of urgency. The reason we establish a sense of urgency is because ministers have many, many things they're trying to look after and achieve on. If you don't have a sense of urgency, it will be put on the back burner. So if it's sugary soft drinks, we can see the problem with obesity. One of the major causes of sugary soft drinks. We really need to take action now, and here are some positive actions. So you know what the ask is. The ask is we want to put a 10% tax on sugary soft drinks. And then you don't try and do it yourself. You create the guiding coalition. So I bring on with me the nutritionists, the public health dietitians. Of course, sugary soft drinks are an incredibly important thing in terms of dental health. So we bring along the public health dentists with us and get that guiding coalition to agree on a policy, a set ask. I would say up to 3 asks, but a main message. See, when you're talking about a tax on sugary soft drinks, you're not just asking really about just a tax, you're also talking about reducing usage, particularly amongst children. You develop and maintain your influential relationships. So you should be talking to people in the media, along with your politicians, along with your bureaucracy. And I can talk more about how you do that. You have to know what you're asking, and I call that the develop the change vision. And you have to be able to communicate that vision in simple and sensible terms, but they also have to be based on evidence. You then need to look at how can you bring the community along with you. So, for example, if you put something in the media, how can you get people to write letters to the editor? How can you get a broader possible support? And you do that through many organisations. The one that can't be sequential is be opportunistic. And Paula, you talked about the elevator pitch before, and that is what this is about. This is being opportunistic. See something happens, or there's a big article in the paper and you can respond to it or build on it. As an example, you see something in social media, you build on. Don't forget that we all laugh and say politicians are only interested in the next election. And it's actually not true. There's quite a number of politicians, probably not that many, who have a really long-term view, but you can't deliver your long-term view unless you get elected. So you also have to generate short-term wins. So I often draw the distinction between outputs and outcomes. The outcome is we want better oral health. The outcome is we want better oral health. The output is an increase in taxation. They give you a small increase in taxation, even though you ask 10%, you get 5%. You immediate there's a big win, and then you make sure you do your praise. Never let up. In fact, Rob Moody's a professor of public health at Melbourne University, and he says when it comes to advocacy, there are the 3 P's are the critical ones: persistence, persistence, and persistence. And so we do that. And then the last thing is, how do you incorporate those changes into culture? So using the same example with sugary soft drinks, the tax just becomes part and parcel of the normal taxation system. And you can find the reference to this in the casebook on advocacy and public health. Look, I can talk about the nanny state. I'll just do very, very briefly. I'm going to touch on it. It comes from political philosopher Philip Pettit. And one of the things that undermines what we do in public health is every time we try to do something, it requires regulation. And therefore, the argument is nanny state. And it's a really, really powerful grab that undermines what we do. I've looked and looked to try and find an alternative grab, and I've never found one that's quite as effective. And what he did was, excuse me, I'm just going to slip away a minute to grab a glass of water, and I'll be just back in half a tick.
While he's getting his glass of water, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Colgate, who is supporting this masterclass series. So take this opportunity to thank them for allowing this to happen, because I think it's a really good opportunity for all our public health members. Thank you, Michael. I just thanked our supporter for this masterclass. So
the distinction here is that that it's about freedom. So the nanny state says, you're interfering with our freedom. And Philip Pettit went, well, actually, that's not what freedom is. It's not about interference. It's about domination. And if you think about, as a liberal thinking of the nanny state and who is the nanny, becomes the question of who is dominating. So when you look at the way industry advertises sugary soft drinks, really they're the ones that are the ones that are being the nanny, not the nanny state. And so the question becomes, who is the nanny? Who is dominating? And when you put it in these terms, governments have a responsibility, a right and a responsibility to intervene, because what they could do, using this example, they could put just as much money into getting a level playing field, into advertising the dangers, the health dangers of sugary soft drinks, as the industry is putting in to attract people. Nobody wants to spend their taxpayers' money that way. They've got an option, and the option is to regulate that advertising. And so that's to stop the domination. And so that makes a situation where good stewardship of government means balancing the issue. So they have a responsibility, I would argue, to regulate. And that's been written up in that way some time ago now. I'm not going to do this. This is Australian-centric public health advocacy, but it actually shows a way of the bureaucracy and how the bureaucracy works. So if Paula circulates the PDF of this one, you can actually look at that one yourself. It's about obesity. It is about obesity policy, and it's quite interesting. Now, Paula, you're ahead of me, and we talked about the elevator pitch. Here I am with a Deputy Director from the WHO, Rudiger Kretsch, and the then Health Minister in the ACT, and we were talking about that, delivering a message. You talk about 3 minutes. I think 3 minutes is the way we should think about these things. So fundamental is 1 to 3 points in priority order. So make the first point first, because the elevator might stop and the minister or whoever get out. And then don't forget you're trying to engage, and actually maybe the other way around. Engage is the first thing. I'll tell you a little story about this. When I was a minister, remember this is over 20 years ago, but I had stepped down from being a minister and out of politics for about 6 months, and I was watching my daughter playing soccer, and she was maybe 13. And she bounced over to me and said, "Oh, Dad, it's so great to have you here at my soccer game." And I said, "But Heidi, I've never missed. I'd always put in my diary, and I attended her soccer games." And he said, "Yes, Dad, but now you pay attention." And so that was because I'm on the sidelines, and everybody has an opinion about health or community care. And people were really lovely, but I would get the elevator pitch really, really regularly. And I would often just hand a card and say, "Look, this is not the right time, but just say to my receptionist that you were talking to me here at soccer, and you'll get an appointment really quickly. So, but there would be times when it wasn't making sense to me, or people weren't engaging, and I'd say, "Oh yeah, okay." So, the elevator pitch is really important. Before you then go to meet the minister, the member, your local member, whoever, ask yourself, what do you know about them? And in almost every parliament, and on the website of all the parliaments, certainly the Westminster Parliament I know, and I imagine it's similar, is the very first speech that member of parliament gave. And it's really important because it tells you, even if they've become much more cynical over time, it tells you why they went into politics. And so remember, we're talking about engaging. And I would regularly actually say, "Oh, I know, Minister, in your inaugural speech that you said da, 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 da." And they would almost always laugh and go, "Oh, you went back through that." And but nevertheless, it's a link and an understanding of the person. And you can find more information about your member of parliament in social media and news and opinion, in all of those things. This is an example from Australia. The Public Health Association of Australia has, I think, 90 policies on 90 policies on this whole range of issues. So you're thinking, oh dear, I really want to think about something with regard to sugary soft drinks. Let's see what they've got. They're renewed every 3 years with at least one professor going through part of that review. And in fact, in the policies and anybody can go into the Public Health Association of Australia, just Google it. And what you find there is that they put 3 or 4 advocacy points on the front page. Then they have about a 2 or 3 page policy, and then maybe background information for some of them, information. And it's interesting that we see under child health, marketing of food and beverages to children, and then a background paper on marketing of food, and the very thing that we were talking about. So really today, that's the sort of thing that I was hoping to cover, and now happy to take any questions, and I'll look on the chat and see how we go, but I'll just stop the share